Hi, I'm Anderson Brown. Today I'm going to talk to you about some more issues in philosophy of mind. Uh, Look at this painting over my shoulder here. It's kind of a nice painting, isn't it? It's got some nice palettes, it's got those blues and those pinks, it's got some interesting forms, some composition. Suppose somebody told you that the reason you enjoy looking at the painting, looking at it with your eyes, and also the reason why you say things like, gee, Andy, that's a nice painting that you have on your wall there. Suppose somebody were to tell you that the reason why you turn your face and your eyes towards that surface and say things like, oh, I like that painting, it's got nice colors, it's an interesting painting, is not because of the way the painting appears to you right now. Suppose they told you that your experience, your sensual experience of looking at the painting with your own eyes, the quality of that experience played no causal role in your behavior. For example, in your behavior of saying, gee, that's a nice painting, I enjoy looking at that painting. Suppose they told you that, no, actually, the reason you say things like that's a nice painting or turn your eyes towards the painting and look at it for a few moments is because of other kinds of physical processes in your brain that you don't understand. That's what we're going to talk about today. You don't have to worry, by the way, because actually those folks are wrong. They're in the grip of some misconceptions. That is, they're taking some concepts in the wrong way. And we're going to talk about that today. Today, we're going to deal with another one of these sort of faddish things that we're seeing in philosophy these days for interesting reasons, I think. And that is epiphenominalism. Let's talk about epiphenominalism today. I'm going to call this Cartesian Distortions of the Epiphenominalism debate. I've already done, have a video on problems in philosophy of mind in general from Cartesian distortions. Going to talk about what I mean by Cartesian distortions. And I have a video on the free will determinism debate, and I have a video on the panpsychism debate. So here's another one, putting together a little playlist of these Cartesian distortions. You know, a lot of people want to be naturalists today and say that we really aren't involved in any kind of dualistic metaphysics. Easy to say and ideologically sound. I'm certainly with people who say that. I'm one of those people. But it's hard to get away from Cartesian distortions, that is, deeply ingrained notions that there is some kind of a soul that is somehow not part of the physical order. And amazingly, ironically, that misconception is involved in all sorts of these discussions that we're having under the rubric of naturalism. I'm really more what you would call an empiricist, that is, in terms of how I think philosophy works. I think it works in terms of something like empiricism. Naturalism, of course, some kind of metaphysical claim. Empiricists like me will tell you that metaphysical claims themselves are kind of dicey. Today, we're going to talk about the epiphenomenalist error because it's having a little surge. A couple of people, got on base with some articles and things. So let's talk about it. First of all, what is epiphenomenalism? First bullet point. It's the view that the phenomenal quality of our conscious experience, the phenomenal quality, the way it feels to look at those pinks and blues in the painting back there, or to taste the garlic in the spaghetti sauce, or just think right now of the way your feet feel. Feel your feet. They feel like something right now. That's your conscious phenomenal experience. Epiphenomenalism is the view that these phenomenal qualities, the way your body feels, the way your feet feel right now, the way the painting looks to you, play no causal role whatsoever, either in the production of your behavior, including your verbal reports about these things, or in the production of thoughts and other feelings. Epiphenomenalism entails that when you say, gosh, my feet feel a certain way right now in their shoes or in their socks or on the bare floor, as it may be, it's not really that sensation that's causing you to say that. If you think that's a weird thing to say, as I said, it is. It's a really weird thing to say. And we're going to talk about how come people make these mistakes today. Second bullet point, epiphenomenalism is characteristic of a widespread misunderstanding in contemporary philosophy of mind. Like I said, I'm working through a series of videos on various examples of this. And it's the idea that consciousness, understood as, what are we talking about? We're talking about consciousness now, phenomenal qualitative experience, the way your feet feel, the way the food tastes, the way the blue color field looks, what it's like to see the color blue, what it's like to taste the garlic or to hear the sound. Phenomenal qualitative experience. We want to be careful what we're talking about. Cannot be integrated into a naturalistic, materialistic theory of mind. I'll get around to this point again later, but one thing to notice is that you can't actually put in words what it's like to see a blue surface or to see those pink tones or what your feet feel like right now or what garlic tastes like. You can get a lexicon with people who describe these things, but you can't write out in words something such that somebody then who had never had the experience would know what it was like to have the experience. And this is one of the things that's really throwing people off here and leading into this epiphenomenalist mistake. I won't say too much about the third point. I don't like to make these rhetorical statements too much, but philosophy is most interesting when you realize that many people, maybe in general, or maybe in the philosophical community, or maybe both, are actually in the grip of something that looks to you. Of course, one might always be wrong about these things. Philosophy is very humbling, I find. Seem to be plainly wrong, and that makes things exciting. Today, many philosophers who think of themselves as naturalists, they'll describe themselves that way to you. And remember, naturalism, a metaphysical position that everything is nature. It looks like it's a monist position. Are in the grip of these dualistic Cartesian notions, just all over the place of a lot of those things that I've mentioned to you. This is apparent in recent discussions of the supposed hard problem of consciousness, agency, intentional free will and determinism. Panpsychism is another sort of contemporary kind of fad. Simulation, that everything might be a simulation. I would point out that's repurposing the word. I mean, obviously, but again, much to talk about, and other topics. And so that makes it a strange moment in philosophy, an interesting moment in philosophy. It's kind of inspiring, but also worrisome when you are in that kind of situation where it looks as if people are kind of in the grip of some kind of misconception. Here's a basic part. I wasn't sure where to really start in on the basics here. Well, I've tried to be provocative. Epiphenominalism is committed to the view that immaterial souls exist. That's a provocative title for the slide, because a lot of people who call themselves naturalists and think that naturalism entails epiphenomenalism are going to tell you that they don't think that there are any immaterial things that exist. But again, epiphenomenalism is committed to the view that immaterial souls exist, as I shall explain now. First bullet point. The epiphenomenalist holds that conscious experience is not part of the physical causal order. I take it that any claim that something X exists and X is not part of the physical causal order is an example of metaphysical dualism. In this case, the X is phenomenal experience. Phenomenal experience exists, and phenomenal experience is not part of the physical causal order. That is a patently dualist claim, and I think maybe that is the essential problem. Alternatively, still in that first bullet point there, one might claim that phenomenal experience is unreal. The late philosopher Daniel Dennett had a line that he thought conscious experience was an illusion, but that's a paradox. That's paradoxical. It's a strategy. He's smart. You don't want to say that it's the dualistic things exist. You want to be a monist, but then you still think that phenomenal experience isn't kind of a natural physical thing. So maybe you try to make it go away. But again, it's paradoxical in that case. And Dennett's claim is clearly incoherent. It amounts to saying this datum thing that we're discussing does not exist. That's paradoxical. I think you'll find if you look at that. Second bullet point. This is the same mistake that would be naturalist. And again, I say in parentheses there, I'm an actual naturalist. Again, it's probably more accurate to say about me that I'm an empiricist. I'm not big on making strong metaphysical claims. I think if I had to make a strong metaphysical claim, I'd probably say I was a monist without putting an adjective on the monism. But I certainly think that, in the way we ordinarily use this language, that I'm a naturalist, in as much as I don't do ghosts and goblins and I don't do angels and demons. I'm an actual naturalist. Again, just so you understand sort of ideologically where I'm coming from or why I might be saying these things. Would-be naturalists make a mistake when they assert that naturalism entails determinism. Why is that? Well, again, the idea is, and it's on both sides, right? It's determinism and libertarianism. They're both two sides of the same coin, both making exactly the same mistake. The whole discussion is a pseudo problem. Why? Because you're saying either that you, the immaterial soul that's not part of the causal order and is therefore an example of a dualist entity and right, of some kind, are sort of being carried along and swept along. You don't really have any agency at all. Or alternatively, you might be saying that you, this immaterial thing that's not part of the causal order, can somehow miraculously break that causal order and not be part of these linear chains of causation all over the place. But again, they're both making the same mistake. They're both saying exactly the same thing, both the determinist and the libertarian. That is, they think that there's something that's you, your person. It's the old Cartesian soul. That's what it really is. That's what they really still believe in, is either being swept along by the natural causal order, or is a miracle that can cut through the natural causal order. Exactly the same mistake. There's no daylight between those two views at all. Final bullet point. Actual naturalism holds that everything is part of the physical causal order, including yourself, okay, and your experiences. Notice that really being naturalist means you are asserting that you believe a metaphysical proposition, the proposition that everything is nature, okay? So it's not going to be the case then that it turns out that you're somehow wrong about your experience or the quality of your consciousness or something. It's part of that material causal order or whatever kind of causal order it is, as well as everything else. That's what a metaphysical monism entails. You say you're a naturalist, then everything is part of nature. So nothing is not part of nature, including your phenomenal experiences. Okay, so I think that's just really the basic issue, and that's why I title the slide, which I think is accurate, not just doing it for effect, that epiphenomenalism is committed to the view that immaterial souls exist. Epiphenomenalism commits the mereological fallacy. This is the other thing, this fetishizing of the brain. Let's talk about that. The mereological fallacy is the fallacy of mistaking the whole for the sum of its parts. It's a seductive mistake for would-be naturalists, right? Because the brain is a physical organ. So it's a physical thing with physical events happening inside of it, physical properties and processes. So why not then stick with me through the second point here. This naturalist understands the basic metaphysical idea that only physical things exist. That's the ideological claim of naturalism, right? And then you try and get it right. It's not so easy. What then is that physical thing that plays the traditional causal role of the soul? You see, you have this sort of notion of what souls do or minds do. And so now you think, well, if I'm a naturalist, it must just be some physical thing that plays that role. Instead of understanding, if you understand that what you are or your body, then you also understand that you don't really have a mind. And also, by the way we use that word mind is heterogeneous. We use certain kinds of words we think of as psychological words for intentional descriptions about intelligent beings who have beliefs and desires. And there's another subset of psychological vocabulary that's the phenomenal vocabulary about sensations and pains and so on, qualities. And that's about qualitative conscious experience. So again, there is no such thing as mind. So you don't need to find some physical thing that's actually doing the work that the mind was doing before. What then is that physical thing that plays the traditional causal role of the soul, causing the body to act as it does? Why, the brain, of course. It's physical, see, but it takes the place of the soul. You just swap out the soul for the brain, but the brain is still playing the role of the Cartesian soul. The classical classroom argument that any student paying attention is going to say is, well, I cut off your leg, I cut off your arm. How about if I just cut all of you off like in the Lily Tomlin movie and tell you just a brain in a jar? But of course, remember that the brain was evolved to be in a body with sensory systems. So chopping it up post facto isn't really going to prove too much. And it's also not obvious that a brain in a jar is actually going to be having what we would call conscious experiences. There are a number of really interesting arguments about that. For example, some that Hilary Putnam makes in his Brain in the Jar writing. In any event, what I want to get to, and this is also something that Alvin Noe in the Embodied Mind writings of his gets to, third bullet point. In fact, what we call the mind is a function of the whole body, embedded in and reactive to its environment. And I think this is particularly true of consciousness. Actual naturalism entails that there are no minds, mind souls, and assigning that magical role of the little person in the head to the brain is deleterious to brain science as well as to philosophy of mind. This is true of a lot of these Cartesian errors that are persistent. For example, there can't be any symbolic architecture inside the nervous system. The nervous system is not an information processing system. Representational theories of mind are wrong. Why? Because semantic properties are not physical properties. So if you want to be a naturalist, you need to make the semantic properties go away. But that representational theory of mind is really baked in there. So some really smart person, and they want to be a naturalist, but they just can't let go. They can't see the radical implications of naturalism. Let's talk a little bit more about how this mereological fallacy drives epiphenominalism. The epiphenomenalist wants to claim that brain activity is sufficient. I just saw that quotation from somewhere. I torment myself on social media where you get a fairly slapdash version of a lot of these things. The epiphenomenalist wants to claim that brain activity is sufficient to cause human behavior. What about, say, muscles and bones? You say, oh, well, you must be misunderstanding what I'm saying. No, not at all. You have a liver, you have a stomach that helps you to digest, you have a brain that helps you to think. There is a misconception in saying that brain activity is sufficient to cause human behavior. And notice, we're not even talking about human behavior. We're talking about having phenomenal experiences. So it must be that the epiphenomenalist thinks that brain activity is sufficient to be having these phenomenal experiences, like Descartes, who says that he doesn't even know if he has a body or if the external world exists, right? Yes. There's a misconception here about what the brain is as well as about what it does. Events in the brain are not metaphysically distinct from events elsewhere in the body. The epiphenomenalist, however, thinks that the brain is a little person in the head, the soul, that's really having all of these experiences because of this mysterious physical, I guess it's physical activity, but doesn't have to be, that's happening in the brain. That is, it doesn't have to be for the epiphenomenalists, since they're not really a naturalist at all. Second bullet point. To say that phenomenal experience plays no causal role is to say that sensory systems in the distal nervous system play no causal role. Because the way that those parts of the body work is through phenomenal experience. A weird construct of the twilight of dualism. This is dualism's sort of dying day, epiphenomenalism. The disembodied brain. Odd. Oh, I'm a naturalist. The brain's an organ. But you're not thinking about it that way. This is the source of the view that since the brain loops and otherwise processes the signal from the optic nerve, we don't actually see. Claim to say we don't have direct perception of the world because it's mediated by our brain, which apparently is something different from us, right? That's the view. Representational theories of mind are not naturalistic. Again, it is also exciting to understand the real implications of naturalism and see just how very radical it is, and particularly how radical it is in the context of contemporary discussions of things like consciousness, like the idea that consciousness is something that brain science is going to solve. But, and that's Christoph Koch's view, for example, and he has these arguments with David Chalmers, who says that phenomenal properties really are examples of dualism and aren't part of the physical causal order. But they're both wrong. It's a pseudo problem. So let's talk about functionalism and absent qualia. I won't go on about this too much, but if you're really interested in this topic, you really need to understand what functionalism is. You really need to study the absent qualia arguments, all of them, and you need to understand what supervenience is. And I know that this gets tiresome, people want to chafe, but you really need to look at that. So let's just work through some really basic stuff here. First bullet point. Any function that can be accomplished using phenomenal experience, such as discriminating colors, identifying wines, catching baseballs, right? Robots can do all of these things. Can also be accomplished by other means. And I agree, I think that's true. And it's an interesting philosophical point about conscious experience. But it does not follow that phenomenal experience is not actually used to accomplish these functions in humans. That's how humans identify wines by their taste and their bouquet and so on. That's how they calculate the trajectory of baseballs, by looking at them. That's how they discriminate colors, by having a certain qualitative experience and not just by measuring the wavelengths like the robots in the car painting factory. Second bullet point. There is currently a widespread fallacy of equivocation between consciousness and intelligence. A real general point, a lot of this discussion is systematically distorted because people are running intelligence together with consciousness. The idea that consciousness might be a function of some kind of central processing unit, because it might be true that a lot of intelligence or intelligent functions and properties might be instantiated in central processing units. If you're just running consciousness and intelligence together, then you might start to get confused about this. Intelligence or cognition can be brought under functional description because it's supervenient. Me, the Martian, the dolphin, the android can all be said to be intentional systems. They come under belief, desire, ascription, but we all have very different bodies. Qualitative consciousness is not supervenient in this way. It is type to type, hyper-chauvinistic type to type identity. In fact, it's because you have that body that things seem and feel the way that they do to you, and that is unique to you. So whereas a lot of your cognitive and intelligent functions are supervenient and can be instantiated in other systems, the quality of your conscious experience cannot. Last bullet point. An operational or scientific definition of consciousness might be in terms of, say, sensitivity and reactivity to the environment. The right point about behaviorism is that if you want a science of psychology, then you need to stick to scientific methodology, which involves intersubjectively observable sets of observations of things that you can quantify over and find things that are statistically significant. And so that's not a completely illegitimate thing to do. A research psychologist might say, well, yeah, that's what I do. I limit myself to empirical science methodology when I'm working on my scientific psychology. And that would be astute. I mean, that's not wrong. But linguistic descriptions cannot capture the quality of experience. And science is a linguistic and representational construct and artifact of human culture. Quality is not a topic for science, including brain science. That's why there's no hard problem. It's not, the quality of your conscious experience is not something located in the world, the common world as it is described in physics books or history books or geography books. Okay, so there's a lot going on there, and I really encourage you to look into that. Then consciousness and the law of effect, and then, getting into a discussion of evolutionary biology. The epiphenomenalist, I suppose, wants to say that evolutionary biology has been doing its thing for a long time. So you're all sort of pre-programmed now. And so your conscious experiences are just nomological danglers, as they like to call them, just something that is a byproduct, like the twinkling of the light on the surface of the stream. But that's incoherent in any kind of evolutionary biological context. And I'll show you why. Again, like the last slide, lots of stuff to discuss here. First bullet point. The law of effect is that positive outcomes reinforce and negative outcomes extinguish. Remember behaviorism there. This is ubiquitous. Think of economics. Darwin got it from Adam Smith. internet memes and jokes. The nature of these memes has been a topic of a lot of interest in recent years. Darwin, looking for the mechanism of speciation, located the operation of the law of effect in comparative reproductive success among siblings. But again, he's just applying the law of effect. In psychology, second bullet point, the law of effect operates in the relative goodness and badness of phenomenal experience. You just think about, like in philosophy, you call value theory. Where does positive and negative come from? This is the learning mechanism for behavioristic models, positive and negative reinforcement, right, notoriously. But look, all evaluative reasoning in humans is a function of the positive and negative quality of conscious experiences. It's the goodness and the badness of conscious experience that we mean when we talk about things being good or bad. And yes, this is an empiricist ethical theory that you're getting from me, the empiricist. That's why I subtitle this video, Whatever Happened to Empiricism? People have really wandered off. Consciousness, and in this sense, is transparently teleological. It's clearly functional. Someone would have the burden of proof is solidly on the person who wants to say that pain is not is not a function. This pain is playing no function in the production of behavior, as you can see that it is, both in terms of reacting to a quality, but also in terms of damage control and other things. Anyway, third bullet point. The evolutionary model then does not only underwrite the experiential causal determinism posited by epiphenominalism. The epiphenomenalist wants to say, oh no, all the work is being done without any of the phenomenal conscious experience. That's just some weird thing that the disembodied Cartesian soul is having. Remember, the epiphenomenalist is committed to that, even though they don't like it. They think they're naturalists, which they're not. The evolutionary model does not underwrite the experiential causal determinism posited by epiphenomenalism, but it also supports the opposite conclusion that epiphenomenalism is a case of overcausation. Okay, the charge is that you have, interpreting the theory, you have overcausation. The theory here would be that being evolved for reproductive fitness is one cause, and having phenomenal experiences is another cause, and that's an example of overcausation. But having conscious experience just is what it is to be evolved for fitness in the case of human beings, and well, most vertebrate mammals at least. A lot similar to human beings, and they are different, by the way. Naturalist, remember? How does the brain unconsciously anticipate every new situation and novel decision without using phenomenal input? It's a version, epiphenomenalism is a version of the way people used to say instinct, right? You're not really making any choices, it's all just instinctual. Again, another misinterpretation of what naturalism means. Okay, getting towards the end here. Epiphenomenalism is an example of skepticism, which is defeasible. I think I mentioned earlier, determinism is also an example of skepticism. First bullet point to define that. Philosophical skepticism is when the skeptic tells us we do not know something we are certain that we do know. That the external world exists, they have a body, other minds exist, and so on. Descartes, the mathematician, said you had to have a proof of the logical necessity of something to show that you were certain about it. David Hume, the empiricist, points out that we don't know really anything on that ground. We don't know that the sun's going to rise in the east tomorrow morning. But, again, the problem is, folks, that we do know that the sun is going to rise in the east tomorrow morning. Is that cognitive? Is that based on some sort of logic? No, it is not. It is based on our experience. Second bullet point, when the epiphenomenalist tells us we don't know that pain causes wincing, right? Pain doesn't cause wincing, it's just a side effect. And good flavors don't cause expressions of pleasure, right? Like the painting behind me, right? It's not causing you any pleasure, and the spaghetti sauce isn't causing you any pleasure, because those are just your phenomenal experiences. They don't have any causal role at all, right? So it's something else. What? Well, who knows? Remember, the 17th century rationalists had an interesting argument that you don't know how the body works. right? Then it's kind of odd to say that you think that things are happening because of physical events inside the body. Okay, third bullet point, then we're getting back to skepticism then here. One response to skepticism, like epiphenominalism, which is skepticism, since after all, it's self-evident that the pains are causing me to behave, that the tastes are causing me to behave, that the temperature is causing me to behave. That is the way the temperature feels to me. One response is to point out the verb to know has criteria for coherent use. You know, also notice, I'm a really straight ahead, like 20th century analytical language person. Okay. I mean, I'm not the woo-woo crazy person here, folks. Okay. Do you know where your keys are? It's coherent for me to ask. It's got pragmatic utility, right? Because you might know where your keys are and you might not, and you might be mistaken about where they are. And so it makes sense for me to ask. It is a coherent question for me to ask you, do you know where your keys are? Okay. But it isn't a coherent question for me to ask you, do you know that the external world exists? Nor is it a coherent question for me to ask you, do you know that the pain is causing you to behave the way that you're behaving? And the argument's deep, and we also find in Buddhism, by the way, I'm not going to get into that in this video, I do that in some other places. Last bullet point. Empiricism holds that all knowledge is produced by conscious experience. And the discussion of the skepticism about the external world would say, well, the external world is the ground of experience. It itself is not an example of experience. Experience happens within the context of the external world. Similarly with the causal efficacy of phenomenal experience. It's all one. You can't just chop out some little part of it. This process, again, I notice, is non-cognitive. Inductive inference, is not logical inference. It's habituation, like David Hume said, to regularities of past experience. So the right answer to the skeptic is that I neither believe nor do I not believe, right? Do I believe that phenomenal qualities are causes of my behavior? It's not something that's a coherent subject of belief or disbelief. I neither believe it nor do I not believe it. It is the context in which I believe things, okay? As well as the context in which I decide whether things are good or bad. Okay, all right, so, okay, stop the share. Okay. So these videos, I don't know. I mean, they do get out to enough people. I've got enough response from them that I think they're good. But the issues here now are broad. I mean, I hope you can see that the misunderstandings and the confusions are vast. Today, I'm putting them in terms of mistakes that people make when they like to think that they're naturalists, but that starts to involve them in all this voodoo stuff about determinism and panpsychism and epiphenominalism and the hard problem, all pseudo problems that reflect all of them. And I know that this is, a tough thing to say, but they all very much reflect misunderstandings and deeply internalized, deeply baked in Cartesian dualist intuitions. You have to understand that there aren't any such things as minds. Okay, there are only bodies. And then you'll start to become a real radical naturalist like you want to be. And I'm sorry if that sounds patronizing, but the arguments are what they are. I'm just, don't kill the messenger. If you've got responses to this, I'd be really happy to hear them, but I don't see what they are. So, all right. So today, the ridiculousness of epiphenomenalism. Again, sorry if I'm in a rhetorical mood. I do try to avoid that. Okay, but thank you. If you've come this far and you're still watching, I thank you very much for your attention. I really do. Okay, until the next time.